Hi, I'm Scarlett from Spin, and today I'm going to talk about the significance of Audrey Hepburn. The first Audrey Hepburn movie I ever watched was My Fair Lady when I was in second grade, so around 7 years old. I was absolutely mesmerized by her. I quickly grew into an obsession with the old Hollywood star, and in fact, as I type this in my room, a poster of Eliza Doolittle, her character in My Fair Lady, is hanging above my head. And 7-year-old me was not alone in this. Audrey has been widely adored and celebrated since her film debut. Her fame and presence in the media, unlike many starlets of her time, has extended into the decades past the peak of her fame and even after her death. Most people would recognize her iconic breakfast at Tiffany's dress and photo with a cigarette and tiara as Holly Golightly. Her quotes are often plastered on walls as inspiration, and her look is replicated in magazines. But why did she maintain so much cultural relevance? Now, much of the reason for her growing popularity in the early to mid-50s can be attributed to sexist ideals, but I think for the most part, Audrey was accessible in a way that no major actress had been before. Nearly all of Audrey's characters were similar. They were young and playful, but still held themselves with a level of poise. Oftentimes, they were even presented as normal people who later underwent a Cinderella sort of transformation. Not only that, but her characters largely dress the same. Audrey was known for her partnership with Hubert de Givenchy. She wears clothes both on and off camera, the most iconic being her town suit and ball gowns in her second film, Sabrina. Audrey outside of these movies appeared to be just like her characters, so much so that people struggled to differentiate between her and the character she portrayed. After all, she did dress, speak, and act almost exactly like them, and all of these characters seemed nice and friendly, making Audrey at least appear to be kind and approachable. Not only that, but several of her movies show her as a common woman. For example, in My Fair Lady, Eliza Doolittle begins as a poor flower girl. She has a strong Cockney-style accent and would be largely considered indecent in high society, but she undergoes a transformation where she begins to talk eloquently and dress in fashionable styles. She goes as far to be invited to the palace. Interestingly, it largely reflects her own life story as a young girl growing up in World War II. Audrey's early life and childhood is straight out of a war movie. When she was merely 11 years old, the Nazis invaded her town in Poland. In order to hide her British citizenship, she changed her name to Etta and entirely avoided speaking English. Using her knowledge of English, though, Audrey was able to join resistance movements, meeting with British intelligence agents and giving them directions, often storing information in her shoe. Audrey, or Etta, survived the Dutch famine but went days without food and lived in a home with several other families for years due to economic woes. But not even a decade after the end of the war, she was covered on TV screens. Her name regularly printed in the news. Even to this day, she's widely celebrated in the media. She herself, just like her beloved characters, underwent a kind of Cinderella transformation. For women at this time, that's quite extraordinary. Obviously, Audrey was incredibly gorgeous and slim, but she was a lot more like them than other Hollywood actresses such as Elizabeth Taylor, Marilyn Monroe, Ava Gardner, Lana Turner, and Brigitte Bardot. All of these women had specific body types that were for the most part not attainable. Post-war was an era of hyper-femininity. This is when American housewife culture became popular. This period signifies a shift back to women in domestic positions, cooking, baking, cleaning, and their more laborious jobs during the war. This was reflected in new dress and couture styles. They exaggerate curves. Christian Dior is quoted saying women long to be women again, and while this is mostly considered harmful, as being a woman in that era mostly meant a lack of rights and respect, there were shifts in both the arts and fashion that expressed femininity. Anyway, the starlets in this time period reflect that. They wear big dresses that accentuate their hourglass figures. Their hair was dolled up in elaborate styles, and they wore heavy makeup looks. Most women hated these actresses, specifically Marilyn Monroe, who was largely viewed as a sex symbol. To many women in the 50s, she represented the male gaze, and of course, Marilyn Monroe was just existing in her body, and she was unfairly hypersexualized. But of course, women in this period were in constant comparison to Hollywood starlets, which generally led to a dislike of them. But Audrey was different. She, in fact, was described as a flat-chested, slim-hipped, and altogether un-Marilyn Monroe-ish. She didn't fit into the mold of the other actresses in the time. Her body type and playful, immature demeanor in her films made her especially identifiable for young girls who almost never saw themselves in Hollywood. They saw a woman maintain her femininity even without an hourglass figure. Audrey often wore casual clothing, trousers, and cigarette pants, and her hair was cut short. Her clothes even highlighted her lack of curves, and she was the picture of elegance, but almost common. She had a uniquely small and uncurved frame, largely due to malnourishment as a child growing up in the Dutch famine. She wore clothes that could be replicated by more than just the elite class, often tagged as the Audrey look, which is still popular today. And of course, her tall, slim figure was in high demand in the fashion industry, which is why so many of her films, such as Funny Face and Sabrina, highlight the clothing. Audrey would grow to have the ideal body type, but at the time, she was entirely different and relatable to women and girls. She was likable, approachable, in a way that hadn't been shown on screen before. Her legacy goes further to prove when she spent her final years as an ambassador for UNICEF until dying of appendix cancer on June 20th, 1993 at 63 years old. And that's it for me. Thank you for listening to You Spin.